We'll go ahead and call the hearing to order. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for being with us. Thank all of our witnesses for being with us today. Today's hearing, we're going to continue the committee's examination into new types of business models, which are propelling entrepreneurship and small business formation and growth. As the ability to connect through innovative platforms has increased, there's been a rise in peer-to-peer businesses. Peer-to-peer businesses create new marketplaces to access goods and services by utilizing technologies such as smartphone apps, GPS locators, and the internet to easily and efficiently connect individuals who may be able to meet each other's needs. While the newness of these platforms limits our ability to know the true economic impact, these new businesses appear to be creating significant shifts in the economy and demonstrate potential for significant economic growth and job creation. Forbes estimated in 2013 that revenue from the so-called sharing economy was likely to surpass $3.5 billion. With these sorts of numbers, it's necessary for the committee to understand what these businesses are and what challenges that they face. Notably, many of us have already seen the effects of peer-to-peer businesses in our daily lives as we utilize things like eBay or Etsy to purchase unique goods or use an app to contact a ride-sharing company for a lift. At the state and local level, the rise of peer-to-peer businesses has fostered interesting debates over whether existing laws and regulations accurately fit these new companies. For example, in 2013, California became the first state to legalize and regulate peer-to-peer transportation companies, finding that those firms were distinctive from traditional charter carrier companies. And again, I want to thank all of our witnesses for being here today and taking the time away from your jobs and making the travel here to Washington for this important hearing. Look forward to your testimony. I'll now turn to Ranking Member Velasquez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Technology has long been a catalyst for entrepreneurship. Just as small businesses often drive some of the most important scientific breakthroughs, developing new products and services, major technological advances also create opportunities for small firms to reach customers. This symbiotic relationship between entrepreneurship and technology has been an important source of economic growth and job creation. In keeping with this trend, development of the peer-to-peer business model has created new channels for entrepreneurs to sell goods and services. Technology innovators are harnessing the web to create new platforms and markets that allow the selling, renting, and trading of everything from apartment space to transportation to artisan craft goods. The numbers strongly suggest that this new sharing company based largely on interactions between consumers rather than traditional brick-and-mortar businesses is here to stay. On a single Friday night, 150,000 travelers are finding rooms to rent from private homes on the Airbnb website. More than 1.5 million Internet users have used TaskRabbit to hire people for odd jobs. Lending Club, which facilitates loans between consumers, has led to $2 billion in lending so far and doubles almost every month. eBay has seen product sales reaching nearly $70 billion in a single year. One reason for this sector's rapid growth may be rooted in broader economic struggles. With job growth still sluggish, enterprising Americans and dislocated workers are seeking new ways to replace revenue. Renting out rooms, providing lifts in their car, and selling homemade goods, food goods have all become ways for ordinary Americans to experiment with entrepreneurship and stay afloat during tougher economic times. While the explosive growth of these networks has created new opportunities, the rapid rise raises questions. As always, it is important that consumers utilizing these sites be protected against fraud and unscrupulous actors. Most of these sites contain review and rating systems to ensure users on both sides of this transaction live up to their commitments. However, as the popularity of peer-to-peer transactions grow and become a larger part of the mainstream economy, additional safeguards may be necessary. As always, the challenge will be ensuring businesses and consumers are protected without quashing or discouraging promising innovation. Many peer-to-peer networks are themselves small businesses Others are larger entities, but are helping self-employed Americans and small firms identify new channels for reaching customers. It is important that as this technological revolution advances, government policy keeps pace. As of yet, the Small Business Administration's initiatives appear ill-suited to help bolster this growing sector, something that I hope can be rectified. It is important this committee fully understands what is happening in the new sharing economy and has a grasp on how we can minimize risk for consumers while maximizing growth and productivity from peer-to-peer business models. On that note, I would like to thank all of our witnesses for taking the time to be here, and your perspective will add significant value as the committee seeks to learn about this rapidly emerging marketplace. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back the balance of my time.
All right, our first witness is Professor Arun Sunder, who teaches at New York University's Stern School of Business, where he studies how information transforms businesses and society. He has been published in Bloomberg, Harvard Business Review, and many other reputable journals. Thank you for being here. Appreciate you coming in.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Graves, Ranking Member Velasquez, and committee members. I'm delighted to have been invited to speak to you about digitally enabled peer-to-peer business. Thank you for convening this important hearing. More light needs to be shed on this promising new segment, so I hope this hearing is the first of many. We need a clear understanding of the economic impacts of peer-to-peer businesses and changes to regulatory frameworks that nurture this rapidly growing segment of the economy. Because this segment will create work, stimulate consumption, raise productivity, catalyze innovation, and facilitate entrepreneurship. The new peer-to-peer economy is enabled by a set of platforms, new marketplaces powered by digital technologies. These platforms enable entrepreneurs, people who want to supply goods and services, to fulfill demand from consumers, people who want to buy, rent, or consume. Thus, they create millions of new, very small businesses, or what are being called micro-entrepreneurs. In my written testimony, I discuss some of the technological drivers, consumerization, institutions, urbanization, ecological issues in some detail. Some platforms allow entrepreneurs to create services by using their own personal labor and assets, like Airbnb and Relay Rides create new versions of familiar, commercially available services like short-term accommodation and car rental. Eat With and Feastly, and perhaps even Sidecar, increase the efficiency and scope of familiar activities like supper clubs and paid ride sharing. Others like Yodel and 1,000 Tools create new services for the rental of owned assets from one peer to another. There are a few other categories of platforms I discuss in some detail in my written testimony. Platforms like Uber and Kitchit that allow professionals of different kinds to leverage their skills and operate as sole proprietorships. Markets like Odesk and TaskRabbit that connect freelance workers with new sources of work. Marketplaces like Etsy and eBay that allow individuals to operate new online retailing businesses, often for products that otherwise would not have a mass market. There's also a host of new peer-to-peer finance and peer-to-peer education platforms that I do not cover because they have unique issues and impacts that I think require a separate discussion. I believe that peer-to-peer businesses enabled by digital platforms will constitute a significant segment of the economy in the coming years and will have a positive impact on economic growth. Why do I think so? First, these businesses and platforms put people to work, not always in traditional jobs, but they are nevertheless creating work that generates income. We need to measure this work creation better. Next, they create new consumption. The peer-to-peer sharing economy expands the variety and quality of existing goods and services, and as well as creating entirely new consumption experiences. Next, they will be a gateway to entrepreneurship. If you want to start a small business, but the risks seem too high, you can transition as a peer-to-peer supplier or dip your toes in the water part-time on one of these platforms. As my colleague Lisa Gansky says, they may be like finishing school for entrepreneurs. Next, they are likely to increase productivity by tapping into underutilized labor sources, by increasing the efficiency of asset usage, and by increasing motivation levels for workers who can now better capture the value created by their labor. Again, further details in my written testimony. Over the next few years, we need robust measurement of the economic impacts of peer-to-peer business, and especially of the small businesses created. We also need to refine existing economic measures so that they fully capture the new forms of production, consumption, and work facilitated by peer-to-peer business. The current regulatory infrastructure is likely impeding the growth of these businesses. The regulations aren't fundamentally flawed, and the safe harbors aren't the issue here. It's primarily because this wave of digital disruption is altering how we experience familiar services. So there is a misalignment between the business models and roles of these new peer-to-peer businesses and the rules and guidelines for the older, analog, industrial age ways of providing services through hotels, taxis, or car rental companies. So I believe that a self-regulatory solution with some government oversight, perhaps through the creation of new self-regulatory organizations or SROs, is worth exploring for these peer-to-peer business markets. The SROs could be the platforms themselves, new industry consortia, or may even emerge from consumer collectives like peers with government oversight. The reason why I believe that this is a good solution is that delegating some regulation will ease the tremendous strain that government at all levels would otherwise bear from constantly having to monitor and correct misalignment of hundreds of new peer-to-peer businesses emerge in coming years. It's also that these new marketplaces have sophisticated digital controls, reputation systems, identity verification, quality screening built in, which play a natural regulatory role that we can rely on to some extent. Consumers already do. The interests of the platforms are also naturally aligned with the interests of a textbook regulator. They can also identify new regulatory issues faster as they arise and take action against infringing market participants more easily. To summarize, these peer-to-peer businesses and the platforms that enable them will create work, stimulate consumption, raise productivity, catalyze innovation, and facilitate entrepreneurship. We should make sure that our regulatory framework nurtures their progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Our next witness is Beth Stevens. Ms. Stevens serves as the Assistant General Counsel for Sidecar Technologies, which is headquartered in San Francisco, California. Sidecar is a ride-sharing phone app that operates on a peer-to-peer level, connecting car owners with folks that need rides. So thank you for being here and coming all the way.
Thank you. On behalf of Sidecar Technologies, I'd like to thank Chairman Graves, Ranking Member Velasquez, and the members of the Small Business Committee for this invitation to speak on peer-to-peer businesses and ride-sharing in particular. Sidecar was founded over a year ago and is a ride-sharing or carpooling, if you will, information service that enables members to exchange information via the Sidecar smartphone mobile application or app with other members to enable ride sharing in a privately owned vehicle. So the way that our service works is a passenger can enter their pickup and destination locations, and the app will send that information out to available drivers, and drivers will then choose to share a ride. In other words, we offer the the digital equivalent of an on-demand carpooling service, or for those of you who do slugging here in the district, a dynamic slug line. So instead of having to show up at a particular location or look on an employee corkboard, you can open up your GPS-enabled smartphone and say, I need a ride, and here's where I'm going. And a driver can say, I've got a car, and I'm going that direction. So trust and safety is vitally important to the sidecar community. The app is built with a number of important safety features, including a dual rating system. So just like eBay allows buyers and sellers to rate each other, Sidecar's mobile app allows a passenger and driver to rate each other. We also have a Share My ETA function, which allows riders to text, tweet, Facebook, email their estimated arrival time to a loved one or friend. We also have an in-app ability to contact the passenger or driver, so there's no need to share or reveal personal contact information when trying to coordinate. We also include a picture of the driver and the driver's vehicle so that passengers can verify that the correct driver is showing up. We have an in-app receipt of the ride with the driver's name. Most often this gets used for lost items, but it also, if something were to go wrong on the ride, it enables the passenger to have comfort that they know who they shared a ride with. There's also an in-app ability to immediately call the sidecar support team should there be an issue on either the driver or passenger side. And it is a completely cashless system, which protects drivers against potential crimes. We also have a $1 million commercial liability policy that covers passengers and third parties for any damage or bodily harm that is the result of the driver. We also pre-screen our drivers. So we conduct Social Security number-based background checks consistent with federal and state laws, which screen for sex offenses, DUIs, reckless drivings, and a whole host of other criminal offenses. We collect the driver's personal information, including their driver's license and personal insurance, and we train drivers how to use our app and provide tips on distracted driving. I'm sure at this point you're saying, well, yeah, I can just carpool with my neighbor. I don't need all this. And what this program allows you to do over traditional ride-sharing programs and carpool lanes and van pools is to develop a critical mass to make sure that these ride-sharing programs can succeed. The research shows that even though carpooling has been around since World War II, programs have failed because there hasn't been a critical mass of users. Users need to know if they're going to take a shared ride somewhere that they can get home. And we also have to encourage drivers and incentivize them to participate. One way to do that is through financial incentives, allowing them to either earn the expense of operating a vehicle, which in an urban area can be quite a bit if you talk about $400 a month to park downtown, the cost of gas, the depreciation of the vehicle, insurance, and maintenance of a vehicle. And ride sharing allows individuals, micro-entrepreneurs, if you will, to either earn those costs of the vehicle or maybe earn a little bit more as part of supplemental income that they bring in. So Sidecar's mobile application offers the opportunity with the ubiquitous use of mobile location-based services to accelerate a broad-based adoption of ride-sharing or carpooling. This adoption of ride-sharing has the potential to produce large-scale public benefits, including easing traffic congestion and the strain on existing infrastructure, reducing pollution, and fostering a sense of community, all while providing car owners an opportunity to offset the cost of car ownership. Sidecar is grateful for the opportunity to discuss ride-sharing with you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Next witness is Alan Mon, CEO and co-founder of 1000 Tools, located in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Mr. Mond is a self-described mechanical engineer turned web designer or web developer and entrepreneur. And launched his company in June of 2003. 1000 Tools is an online platform that allows individuals to rent tools from their neighbors. Mr. Mond, thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. Chairman Graves, Ranking Member Velázquez, and members of the committee, I'm Alan Mond. I'm the CEO of 1000 Tools, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to speak with you regarding our peer-to-peer business. We actually started in June 2013, so we're one of the youngest around here. 1000 Tools is an online platform that enables people to rent tools from each other. Our latest product allows local governments to rent underutilized equipment to one another, but we'll get to that in a minute. We're based in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and it's an honor for me to be here today. I come from a family of tinkerers, and the idea for 1000 Tools came when I had to replace the timing belt on my 1995 Ford Probe. I had the willingness to do it myself, but I didn't have the right tools for the job. So my solutions at the time were to buy a bunch of expensive tools that I'm never going to use again, or to borrow from my friends. But my friends didn't have all the tools either, and if I continuously borrow from my friends, that's going to erode even the best of friendships. So I thought, I wonder if anyone else has this problem, and wouldn't it be nice if I could just access tools, a large network of tools? So with this idea in mind, we built 1000tools.com, and we launched in June 2013 to test this hypothesis. Our website offers a secure interface for tool renters to pay with a credit card, and for tool owners to get funded via direct deposit straight into their bank account. Prices are set by the tool owner, and they compete directly against established tool rental stores. Tool exchange happens locally, in person, so no shipping is required. Reviews and ratings are also provided for each transaction. 1000 Tools provides Americans the opportunity to become micro-entrepreneurs, using assets they already own. This new generation of collaborative consumers and micro-entrepreneurs live in an ecosystem called the sharing economy, and it has already crossed the chasm into mainstream adoption. As many of us have already explained here, Airbnb, for instance, the online marketplace for listing and booking short-term housing accommodations, announced in June 2012 that they have reached their 10 millionth booking, and they compete head-to-head against even the largest hotel chains in the country. Most of our users in our space of tool rentals are early adopters. They've participated in other areas of the sharing economy. However, there are still some concerns about liability and property damage, and these are still the predominant barriers to mass adoption. Additionally, there are very few insurance companies that are familiar with this type of exposure, and there's even fewer that are able to offer liability insurance for micro-entrepreneurs. So as we grow our user base, we started looking at a different customer segment. And this is how we found out the really interesting niche in local governments. 3 months ago, we started focusing on local government equipment sharing. And after interviewing 30 municipalities in the southeastern Michigan region, we discovered an incredible gap. Large municipalities have expensive equipment that goes underutilized, and small municipalities tend to rent at high premium rates instead of purchasing equipment. So out of the 30 city managers that I interviewed, 70% were extremely eager to try our prototype. So with this information in hand, we retooled our existing technology to cater straight and directly to municipalities. That's how we created MuniRent. MuniRent is a new website that's spun out of 1,000 tools that allows different levels of local governments, like municipalities, counties, road commissions, to rent out the equipment to each other. Now, some of you may be asking, why aren't municipalities doing this already? And that's really a great question. But as with most areas of local government, resources are limited. It takes a lot of resources for a municipality to set up a rental agreement, maintain some sort of catalog of all the equipment they have, and let alone keep track of invoicing, hours, maintenance records, etc. We, MuniRent, we provide a vetted roundtable agreement between the different municipalities and handle all the details, including insurance verification, payment, invoicing, and all of this is available through an extremely easy-to-use website and a just-released yesterday Android app. Our journey began building a peer-to-peer tool renter marketplace, but we now look forward to welcoming municipalities as the newest members of this brave new sharing economy. Thank you very much.
Without recognition or with? Yes, it is my pleasure to introduce Professor Philip Auerswald. He is an associate professor at the George Mason University School of Public Policy, where he focuses on entrepreneurship and innovation in a global context. Previously, he was a senior fellow at the Kauffman Foundation and has served as an advisor to the Clinton Global Initiative since 2010 on topics related to job creation, education, and market-based strategy. Professor Auerswald is the co-founder and co-editor of Innovations, Technology, Governance, Globalization, a quarterly journal about entrepreneurial solutions to global challenges, and is the author of The Coming Prosperity, How Entrepreneurs Are Transforming the Global Economy. Professor, you're most welcome.
Thank you very much. Chairman Graves, Ranking Member Velasquez, members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to share with you this afternoon some thoughts on the economic context for peer-to-peer business models. In 1988, a quarter century ago, I drove a stranger's Nissan Sentra from Washington, D.C. to Seattle, Washington. In the process, I earned $250 with the added bonus of moving both myself and my stuff across the country. The vehicle's owner made out well, too. She got her car transported 3,000 miles for less money than she would have had to pay if she had hired a commercial service, and certainly at a lower opportunity cost of time than she would have incurred if she drove the car herself. Peer-to-peer, win-win. At its human core, the peer-to-peer or sharing economy is not a new phenomenon. Had Alexis de Tocqueville had the chance to write about the United States of today, in addition to that of the 1830s, he would have found in peer-to-peer businesses like Sidecar and 1,000 Tools much of a distinctly American character. So is there anything fundamentally new about the sorts of peer-to-peer businesses that have been proliferating in the past 5 years? Yes. The difference between the past and the present is in the platforms over which people find one another, conclude transactions, and establish reputations. The triple revolutions in computation, communications, and algorithmic power that have unfolded over the past half-century have, as we have been hearing, dramatically lowered the costs of finding a provider of a service, assessing their reliability, and ensuring that the transaction can be performed in an equitable manner. Participants in the peer-to-peer marketplaces are clearly drawn by the straightforward gains from trade that are made possible by lower search and transactions costs. Simply put, buyers pay less than they would without the service and sellers earn more, if only because they often would not be able to bring their service to market without the peer-to-peer platform. Furthermore, buyers have access to previously unavailable options in the marketplace, while sellers have opportunities to diversify their sources of income and increase their financial resilience. Of course, new business models that gain market acceptance almost invariably invite challenges from incumbents. New peer-to-peer businesses are no exception. Wherever peer-to-peer platforms have gained traction across the country, regulatory challenges have followed. Invoking regulatory equity, for example, taxi car drivers have sought to slow the growth of car and ride-sharing services like Sidecar and so forth in other areas of the peer-to-peer economy. These are largely local issues. So what does this all mean for the formulation of policy at the federal level? From the standpoint of the United States Congress, the peer-to-peer business models that matter most are the ones that we've not seen yet. It is instructive to ask ourselves why we're focused today on local transportation, hospitality, food service, and the rental of consumer goods as the most significant domains of innovation in peer-to-peer business models. The reason, arguably, is that these are industries in which regulatory complexity is relatively low. In contrast, there has been relatively little innovation of peer-to-peer business models within healthcare, energy, and education, where regulatory complexity is relatively high. These three industries comprise more than a quarter of U.S. GDP. The greatest macroeconomic impacts of peer-to-peer business models for the United States thus will not be realized until we have established the training, certification, licensing, and auditing mechanisms at all levels of governments that allow neighbors to earn their livelihoods by taking care of neighbors and by providing power to their communities and offering validated, work-relevant training to people anywhere who seek expanded opportunities. In more general terms, the bottom line is this. Shared prosperity requires not only innovations that scale up to create new wealth, but also innovations that scale out to create new opportunities. Let me be very clear about this point. Much of my own work, as well as important research conducted over the past decade at the Kauffman Foundation in Kansas City, with which I've been affiliated, is about the value to society of scale-up innovation, particularly via new entrepreneurial entrants. This research has demonstrated that the small proportion of new ventures that scale up rapidly are responsible for a disproportionate share of value creation in the economy. But here's the problem we've run into. While some scale-ups create large numbers of new jobs, many do not. Companies like Apple, Google, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter have all achieved valuations in the tens and even hundreds of billions of dollars, but they directly employ far fewer people per dollar of revenue than their Fortune 500 counterparts did a generation ago. This is where peer-to-peer platforms come into play. By their very structure, peer-to-peer platforms scale out success to reach tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of people with opportunities to create viable livelihoods for themselves. They create new and enticing invitations to latent producers within the economy to employ their individual assets, talents to create economic value. In the coming decades, the United States and other advanced industrialized economies will no sooner return to the routinized manufacturing-centric economy of the 20th century than to the agrarian economy that preceded it. The issue is not whether new livelihoods based on peer-to-peer business models are better or worse than the industrial age jobs that are disappearing from large corporations. The real point is when jobs are eliminated in the process of digital disruption, they will not be coming back in their old form. As that happens, we humans have no choice but to fall back on our fundamental social skill set, creating and sharing with one another. There is, however, one big difference. Unlike our isolated ancestors of millennia past, Americans in this century are empowered by architectures of collaboration that allow for the creation of new and diverse livelihood at unprecedented rates. Therein lies the power of today's peer-to-peer economy.
Thank you all very much, and we'll now go with questions. I'm going to turn to Mr. Collins for first questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is a great hearing because I, for one, really had not heard of peer-to-peer. We all know about Uber here in D.C., but I guess I hadn't considered, the tool, the 1,000 tools, and what Sidecar is doing. I'm intrigued by that, and I think your hearing today might spur some other entrepreneurs to think, well, there's people that want to borrow more than just tools. And so I'm curious, Mr. Mon, you've been in this a year, and my first question is, I'm assuming you have a fee charge because yours is a cashless transaction, so you must just charge a percentage.
Yes, that's correct.
And so what issues, do you have any issues, for instance, do you have to give out 1099s or, if somebody really sees this going and they're renting out a lot of tools, it's kind of an underground economy. And, so there's always the question of sales taxes, there's the question of income taxes, underground economy. Because you are conducting the financial transaction, what's your liability or what issues do you face?
So we haven't had to come across that point yet because we're not old enough as a company. But yeah, typically I'm also a superhost on Airbnb on the room sharing website. And yeah, we receive 1099s as hosts. Basically, we receive an income.
I'm thinking more the person that's renting the tool. He's getting money. How does his income get reported or?
Right. Yeah. There is a form that you receive as the owner.
Oh,
of the
from
tool.
you that you prepare.
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. So you're a year in, and are you nationwide or are you in specific markets? And how do you, I wanted to replace my faucet the other day. I recognized I didn't have the tools either, so I just hired a plumber. But that was probably safer as well. But you need a critical mass as well, because if I go to tool, 1,000 tools, and I can't find what I need, I may not come back. And so how many cities or markets are you in?
Well, Mr. Collins, hopefully after this hearing, we'll go nationwide. But right now, we're very strong in Ann Arbor, which is where we started. We actually have, for some reason, a critical mass in the D.C. area, because when we were at the Maker Faire event in Detroit, we've had a contingency of people from the D.C. area, and they said, please open this up in the D.C. area. Okay. And so we did, and it's open here. So if you have tools that you'd like to post for rent, it'd be our honor to have you.
I would think, too, you've developed the IP, the software. Whether it's tools or whether it's boats or whether it's jet skis, or, I would think it could expand beyond just tools, right?
Yeah, we wanted to stay very focused on tools for an important reason, and that's kind of dilution of focus. When people come to our site, we want them to know that what they're going to find are tools, and if they think of any tool that they'll need, they can automatically relate that to 1,000 tools. There are other sites that came and went that were very broad, so you could rent anything that you could possibly think of, but that's the problem. Sometimes you just don't know what is going to be available, so
Sure.
you get turned away.
So now, Ms. Stevens, how do you make money? Do you also, is it yours cashless and you charge a transaction fee? Is that?
That's correct. We take a percentage of the ride payment that the passenger makes to the driver.
And the driver sets that payment?
Not currently. That may be an option in the future. We're just over a year old, but currently the payment is determined based on time and distance using a third-party API.
Okay. And I'm assuming you must track repeat customers and the like. What's the biggest complaint you get?
The biggest complaint from drivers or passengers?
Both?
From drivers, the biggest complaint currently would be declined credit cards. So we're working on a pre-authorization system, and we're guaranteeing payment on all rides to drivers if for some reason that credit card is declined. From passengers, I'm not sure we get a whole lot of complaints. We get a whole lot of questions of, I left my cell phone in the back of the car. And fortunately, since we track every ride and they know who gave them a ride, we can usually find it pretty quickly.
Very good. Well, my time's expired, but again, thank you for coming in because I think you're on the cutting edge of something new. It's intriguing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Professor Sunder, given the nature of the peer-to-peer platform, it will be difficult, if not impossible, to capture their contribution in official employment statistics. What are the ramifications of excluding job creation from these government employment indicators?
I think that one of the ramifications is that we may be not measuring the full extent to which the country is employed, because we tend to count employment in terms of whole jobs. We do try and capture, to some extent, people's second jobs. But in a lot of cases, individuals who are providing labor and assets through, say, a marketplace for renting tools, or occasionally being an Airbnb host or selling stuff on Etsy, don't think of this as a job. And so they don't report it in the statistics. So one ramification could be that we are not measuring the extent of job creation as much as we should be. Another ramification might be that we may be moving into sort of an economy where a fraction of the population does not hold a full-time job, but gets their income from providing sort of assets and services on a number of different peer-to-peer platforms. Yeah. And if this is the case, then we need to start thinking about a bunch of issues that surround what happens when rather than people having sort of mainstream jobs from traditional corporations, a much larger fraction of the country are freelancers or self-employed.
Yeah. Professor Awerswald, do you have any thoughts?
Thank you, Ranking Member Velasquez. I think you've asked an extremely important question. The statistics that we have came out of the middle of the 20th century when the concentration of economic activity was essentially the way in which the economy grew, and employment within large-scale firms was considered to be employment success. We're really moving into a very different world today, and I fully endorse the notion that we have to think about different forms of measurement. I'm not representing George Mason today, but I can say that we are daily facing the question of how best we can equip a new generation to be successful in the 21st century. We're well aware that we need to train students and train young people or people of all ages to adapt flexibly in a changing economy. But I think that this dimension of being able to provide services directly to other people, and particularly in those large areas of the economy, as I mentioned, health above all, but also energy and education, peer-to-peer services, and the ability to serve other people directly and provide services directly, I think is a tremendous area of growth.
Thank you. Many of the new peer-to-peer entrepreneurs have had difficulty operating their businesses in a regulatory scheme that was formed for traditional brick-and-mortar businesses. With the changing environment in which companies conduct daily businesses, how can we adapt existing laws and regulation to work for the entire marketplace?
So entrepreneurs always will work within whatever the structure, regulatory, and market that they're facing. I think peer-to-peer businesses have done the same thing. They have, as I noted, been most successful and have grown most quickly in those areas where there's been some sort of regulatory clearing. Maybe there's some uncertainty as to how the business model will be received, but that's part of the risk of being an entrepreneur. I think that the important thing is for regulators to appreciate the contribution of the peer-to-peer economy, and that's exactly why this hearing is so welcome, and to understand that this is a new and valid mode of economic activity, neither better or worse than what we've seen in the past, but something that that brings a lot, even if it, of course, is going to be associated with new risks and new ways of thinking. I don't know that it varies greatly from industry to industry what the appropriate responses are, but I think the most important thing is that regulators understand that these open spaces for innovation are not just important; they're, I think, critical for the economic future of this country.
What we hear is that some of the peer-to-peer businesses, the kind of obstacles that they face is in terms of regulations at the state and local levels. So my question is, what can we do at the federal level to help foster growth with these businesses?
Well, obviously, given our federal system and distributed authority, there's a limit to what the federal government can do at the state and local levels. But I think there really are signaling issues. There's issues about coordination of regulation at different stages, and I think at the federal level, there's issues of focusing in those areas where the federal role is particularly significant. And so that's why I say, healthcare is one area where we could have very significant innovation in peer-to-peer models that would be cost-lowering, and that would reach particularly people over 50 with care in their homes and through mobile services, business models that are nascent but really haven't been seen because the regulatory environment isn't inviting them. So I would say that that's the most important role for Congress, is to focus on the areas where its regulatory oversight is most direct.
Professor Sunder.
Yeah, this is a really important question. I think that the reason why we have seen state and city regulatory barriers to peer-to-peer businesses thus far is that a lot of the issues that have come up in the industries that are being disrupted, accommodation, transportation, urban transportation, tend to be regulated by city and state authorities. However, I do believe that there is a role for the federal government to play here on two fronts. One is to sort of provide the groundwork that might sort of lead to the creation of something resembling self-regulatory organizations for some of these industries. I think that there are going to be a lot of new regulatory issues that come up as more and more industries become peer-to-peer businesses. And it helps to sort of delegate responsibility with oversight to the people who are closest to, the changes, and who also have the ability to take action most easily. So, a platform can disconnect a infringing supplier from their platform very easily. So that's.
But how do we provide a level playing field for those brick and mortar businesses that have to comply with regulations that might put them at a disadvantage with peer-to-peer?
Well, it seems to me that a lot of the regulations that are in question here are ones that were developed to address specific issues that are sort of prevalent in brick and mortar provision of, say, if you're running a hotel chain or if you're sort of providing taxi service. So some of these regulations may be supplanted by digital technologies. I've also always had the impression that a brick and mortar company can also, in addition, especially a large brick and mortar company, there's nothing that's preventing them from adding a peer-to-peer or a rental or a sharing dimension. I fully expect that Walmart and Amazon will enter the space. BMW has entered sort of the space. GM is an investor in relay rides. And so they're not sitting on their hands and waiting. I mean, they certainly have the opportunity to adopt these new business models themselves. If it turns out that the lowered regulations on those fronts are going to sort of give them business advantage.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Schweikert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Professor, you were starting to go down a couple paths there that,
Yes, Professor.
Sorry. How many? I'm sorry, I'm not wearing my glasses. How many do I have? I'm down.
There's two professors.
Okay. All right. Professor number one.
Okay.
Okay. We actually have a number of examples of this in our economy that have been going on for quite a long time. In many ways, private jets have been leasing out their excess capacity. I know of large printing facilities that, you have these huge capital expenditures and the equipment's designed to run 24/7, so sell your excess capacity. And many of us have always thought of the peer-to-peer type sales as business to business for those who've engaged in large capital expenditures to basically maximize out, how do you amortize out the cost of this?
Yep.
What's fascinating here, and to my friend from 1,000 Tools, I'm your new best customer because I own every tool you can imagine. I own tools, I have no idea what they actually do. But it's a fascinating, and Professor, have you looked at some of the modeling of what upheaval, but also what opportunities? Because in many ways you're creating these high levels of efficiencies in the economy, but you also may now change certain need for certain capital expenditures. If I have to go buy a $3,000 swedging machine that I'm only going to use for one project, I no longer need to do that. So you may slow down capital expenditures, but actually make the economy much more efficient.
That's true.
So it's an allocation.
Yep, that's true, and that's a very good point. At this point, the evidence suggests that, the direction of change is unclear. I mean, there are many different effects, as you point out. On the one hand, the increased efficiency of usage may cause some people to say, well, I don't need to buy a car, I can just sort of rent one through relay rides whenever I want one, or I don't need to buy a bunch of power tools, I can just rent them through 1,000 Tools. On the other hand, there may be some people who are not incurring these capital expenditures because they can't afford them. They want the asset, but they can't afford, I want that nice car, but I can't buy it. And now that there's a secondary market over which I can rent it when I'm not using it, maybe I'm going to increase my acquisition.
It's a simple example of the person that buys the house with the guest room, and they intend to rent it.
Yep. So, I mean, what I'm reassured by is that historically, whenever there's been a technological change that has led to greater asset efficiency, this tends to grow the economy rather than shrink it. It sort of creates new forms of consumption that tend to sort of have a positive rather than a negative effect. But as you say, the jury is still out. We need to gather data over the next few years to actually quantify the extent to which this is altering both welfare and capital expenditure.
And to Professor, is it Esserwold?
Auerswald, yeah.
Auerswald.
Yeah.
Do you agree with Professor number one in regards that this actually makes an economy more efficient, therefore you get a multiplier effect in economic growth?
So the professors are in agreement. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
No,
but also where I was going to, because in just sitting here, I can come up with probably a couple dozen examples of this that have existed for years in our economy in some fashion, and have done actually quite healthy and quite well with actually a very soft touch from a regulatory environment.
Well, I think that's partly what's fascinating about this space. Before the 20th century, the peer-to-peer economy was the economy. There was no other economy. We didn't have large corporations providing services. This is a relatively new thing. Now we have platforms where we can return to something like an economy that we had in the past, but with the efficiencies of the 21st century and with the computational power that we've developed over the past 50 years with billions and trillions of dollars of investment. So what I think is different here is that, and I think part of the answer to your question is that there's a threshold to undertaking a project. And so I think that there are certain projects, whether in the home or for other people, that people would not have undertaken did they not have access to the tools once 1,000 Tools grows to scale.
But in that same is, the threshold for, is it Ms. Mond?
Stevens.
So no, Mr.
Mr. Mond, yeah.
Okay, on 1,000 Tools. So your biggest barrier is to actually, in many ways, have participants in many different places willing to take, their privately held capital assets and make them available. So, your biggest barrier right now is actually one of information and liability, I would assume. And so now you have sort of a whole new world of law of, what liability do I have if, what sort of insurance do you require a driver to have if they pick up someone? What sort of, if you let me loose with someone else's skill saw and I don't know how to ratchet it down. And I won't show you my toad that I put a, nail gun through earlier this year. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm well over time. Thanks.
Ms. Castro. And we've got a set of votes coming up, so we'll try to get through everybody real quick. Mr. Lukemeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mond, everybody's sitting on the edge of the chair here wondering, after your testimony, did you get your car fixed?
Yes.
Did you use your own service? Did you find somebody else's tools, or you go to a rental place, or how did you get it fixed?
Actually, I went to Sears and bought a bunch of tools.
So now you're one of your own members of your own company, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Renting out your tools.
I eat my own dog food.
Okay. I'm kind of curious, what's the biggest impediment that you've come across so far in your business, Mr. Mond and Ms. Stevens?
So the biggest barrier was, or still is, education about this, and essentially mass adoption of this type of business model. And the second impediment has been the litigious society that we live in. Prevents a lot of people from just joining blindly. They're very careful about liability. So having some sort of liability insurance for micro entrepreneurs would be, if I were an insurance company, something I would seriously look into, because Airbnb, who's kind of been around for a while, since 2008, they don't offer liability insurance. So just so that's on the record. On their website, they say that you have to protect yourself from liability.
Ms. Stevens?
Our biggest issue is local regulators and viewing these, what we really believe is an information technology platform and an online marketplace, in the lens of a traditional taxi or commercial carrier. So while we've made good progress with regulators in California and here in the District of Columbia who are willing to look at this in a different lens, the Seattle City Council has reacted quite aggressively and with the express and stated purpose of protecting incumbent taxi drivers. So it's really about competition and protecting the status quo in some local municipalities, which we think doesn't benefit the consumer. So that is our largest hurdle. We were shut down in New York and Philly and Austin by local regulators.
One of the, I assume that you probably not are just too capital intensive, so you probably don't need lots of funding, but do you have any access to credit problems from the standpoint that you're startup companies, you're doing something that's unique, never been done, or hasn't been done very much anyway? Do you find that to be a problem?
I mean, we are the traditional startup with VC backing, and we have not experienced, limitations in that way, the way that maybe a traditional small business would, going to a bank asking for a loan. So I can't say that we've suffered that, but the challenge here is proving that this can work in a way that is cash flow positive.
Mr. Mond, have any problems with that?
We're even less traditional of a startup because we're bootstrapped, meaning we pay for our own way through other means. So.
Okay, to attract people to list their tools with you, how much marketing do you do? Do you have somebody who goes out and contacts all these people, or do you just have a mass mailing, or how do you do that?
So our main means of marketing this is actually going to the biggest maker fairs that we can find. This is where it's our biggest bang for our buck. So maker fairs are places where a lot of people congregate, and they're all people that work with tools. And people just go nuts when we go there. But that's really our best way, just word of mouth.
How do you market your product then? To the consumer, how do you market the product to you?
What do we tell them, or what's the vehicle?
How do people find out about you?
Mostly through word of mouth.
Word of mouth, really. Ms. Stevens.
For us, there's a lot of traditional social media advertising, so Facebook, Twitter, et cetera. There's also word of mouth is really important. So for any peer-to-peer marketplace, the secret is how do you crack virality? How do you get people to talk about your product, to share referral codes?
You on
to use it?
Craigslist or Craigslist have you?
We do have some ads on Craigslist to attract
Really?
drivers.
Wow, fantastic. I'll stop right there, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Ms. Herrera Butler, and welcome back. We've been thinking about you and your baby.
Thank you very much. Ms. Stevens, I was really intrigued. I'm from Washington State. I was intrigued to hear you say that the city of Seattle focused a little bit more on what it sounds like protecting a certain subsect of I guess, I don't know if it'd be workers or owners, taxi drivers, versus the entire commuting population of a very busy city with a lot of really bad traffic. And it sounds like you've experienced, because when you were talking about it, I thought, well, in similar with 1,000 Tools, go to a big city. It doesn't surprise me that 1,000 Tools works well here in D.C. People don't have a lot of space to store stuff. They don't want to invest in going to buy a bunch of tools. I've been in this place myself. My car broke. We had serpentine belts. We had to go buy some big weird tool like this big that was more than the belt that we'll never use again. And then I think we left it somewhere because it's like, I don't have room for this. So that doesn't surprise me when I think about, your services. You're going to look in the big cities. And it sounds like several of them have created either a regulatory barrier or almost kind of a, I don't know. I think you described it as defending the status quo, which to me is just, it's absolutely nuts because congestion in some of these cities is some of our biggest problems. So why wouldn't you want to, develop this system? I actually was in the state legislature when someone brought up slugging, and having been back here, I've said, hey, slugging's a good option for us. How could we help with that? I mean, do you see that as just kind of protectionism? Is it education? I mean, how could we help?
Right, and I absolutely agree. We're flabbergasted by it. And our goals, and this is why we've always included destination, passengers entering their destination, is because we want to get to true ride sharing. And there's this idea with perhaps some of our competitors that suggests that this is really just quasi-taxi. And so it's education. It's also signals that you all can send to your home states about the importance of this and the potential. But it's really about fostering innovation and waiting for and not cutting off before we can achieve all of the potential that I mentioned in my opening remarks about reducing congestion, reducing strain on existing road infrastructure, and potentially reducing pollution.
I want to thank all of you for participating today. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your hectic schedules to come and help us understand better some of the peer-to-peer businesses out there and get your perspective on how these are affecting our economy, particularly when we have jobs that are so scarce. These offer some unique opportunities for individuals to monetize some assets and for entrepreneurs to pursue some really good ideas, but I do appreciate you all coming in. We do have a series of votes coming up, so the timing ended up being just about right. And I'd ask unanimous consent the members have 5 legislative days to submit statements supporting materials for the record without objection. That's so ordered. And with that, the hearing is adjourned. Thank you.